It's 8:47 in the morning, and you're sitting in a meeting that means absolutely nothing. Nodding along to words you aren't really hearing, when your phone buzzes once beneath the table. It's a payment alert. $4,000 just hit an account your boss has no idea exists, sent by a client who assumes you work for yourself full-time. Your pulse jumps. Your manager keeps talking, you smile, you nod, you say completely agree to something you didn't even process, and under the table your palms have gone cold. This is the exact moment it hits you that you're living two separate lives, and only one of them is allowed to be visible. 6 months earlier, you were nobody in particular. You clocked in at 9. You answered emails you couldn't care less about. You sat in traffic wondering how much of your one and only life was getting poured into beige office walls for somebody else's vision. You kept telling yourself it was temporary. Everyone says that, most people are still saying it a decade later, but you refuse to stay one of them. Phase 1 is the seed, and it gets planted quietly. You start small, after hours, in the 15 minutes before sleep pulls you under, and the 30 minutes before your alarm drags you back into the machine. A freelance gig, a skill on the side that nobody at the office even knows you have. You don't tell a soul. Not your coworkers, not your boss, not even your closest work friend, because the second they find out, it becomes real to them before it's even real to you. And real to them means it can be repeated, laughed at, or worse, undermined. You learn the first law of the double life fast. Silence is your shield. Your first client hands you $200. It feels like winning a small war. You keep staring at that number in your banking app the way other people stare at a promotion letter. You built that. Not your job title. You. Phase 2 is discipline, and it's brutal in ways nobody warns you about. You're still expected to show up at full throttle during work hours because a dip in your performance review is the quickest route to being noticed for all the wrong reasons. So, you split yourself in two. 8 hours of pretending to be fully engaged for a company that would replace you in a week if it padded their quarterly numbers. Then 2, 3, sometimes 4 more hours building the thing that's actually yours. You quit watching TV. You quit late night scrolling. Sleep turns into something you ration instead of something you're owed. Your friends start noticing you've pulled away. You let them believe whatever they want because the truth, that you're constructing an exit while still wearing the costume of loyalty, isn't something you're ready to defend out loud yet. There's a very specific kind of exhaustion that comes from running 2 schedules inside one single day. Your body sits in the office. Your mind has already checked out, running numbers on a spreadsheet only you can see, calculating exactly how many more months of this double life it'll take before the escape becomes survivable. Phase 3 is your first real test, and it shows up disguised as an ordinary Tuesday. Your manager schedules a quick sync. Those 2 words never mean anything good. You sit down. He slides a laptop across the desk, and on the screen is an invoice with your name on it, from a client, for freelance work, routed through a payment platform that was carelessly linked to an account you'd assumed was untraceable. Your stomach drops straight through the floor. He asks if this is a conflict of interest. He asks if you've got a second job. Every second of silence is a decision. Lie and risk getting caught in something even worse down the road. Deflect and buy yourself time you might never get again. You choose the second option, carefully, calmly, telling him it's a small personal project that never touches company hours or company clients. Technically accurate, legally defensible, morally gray enough to keep the 2 of you in that room instead of him walking you straight out of it. He lets it slide this time. But something in you shifts that day. The fear of getting caught stops being some abstract idea. Now it has a face, a conference room, a laptop screen. And instead of shrinking you, it sharpens you. You go home that night and you don't cry, you don't spiral, you build. You tighten your systems even further. A different bank, different devices, different hours, shifted earlier, quieter, smarter. You're no longer an amateur dabbling in a second life. You're becoming someone who actually knows how to run one. Phase 4 is momentum, and momentum is more addictive than anything that office ever offered you. Your side income crosses $1,000 a month, then 3, then 5. You obsess over the math the way other people obsess over calories or step counts, except you're counting freedom in dollar signs. $5,000 a month covers rent. $8,000 covers rent plus savings. 12,000 is the number that starts to feel like it could genuinely replace the paycheck you've leaned on since you were 22. You start turning down things at work you'd have agreed to without hesitation a year ago. Not loudly, not in a way that draws eyes, just quietly guarding your energy, because now you know exactly where it's actually needed. And it isn't inside that building. Your coworkers pick up on something different about you, even if they can't quite name it. You're calmer in meetings that used to wreck your nerves. You seem far less rattled by your manager's opinion of you. Power does that, even hidden power. Even power nobody else can see yet. It changes how you hold yourself because you know something they don't. You have a way out. They don't. Phase 5 is the temptation to move too fast, and this is exactly where most people in your position torch everything they've built. The side income is now strong enough that quitting doesn't just feel possible, it feels urgent. Every single morning in that office starts to feel like theft. Theft of your time, theft of your sharpest hours, theft of a life you can already see clearly enough to reach out and touch. You almost pull the trigger. The resignation email sits drafted in your notes app for 3 weeks straight. Your thumb hovers over send more than once. But by now you've learned enough to know that impulsive freedom is just another kind of trap. You force yourself to build a runway instead of taking a leap. 6 months of expenses saved, untouched, off limits. A second and third client locked in so the entire operation doesn't collapse the moment one relationship falls apart. A legal structure quietly set up so what used to look like a side hustle starts to look, on paper, like an actual business. Because that's exactly what it's become. This phase tests your sense of self harder than any other. You start feeling like a fraud in both directions. Not enough of an employee to feel safe at your job anymore. Not enough of an entrepreneur to feel legitimate outside of it. You're standing on a bridge strung between two versions of yourself, burning behind you and unfinished ahead of you. Phase 6 is the quiet goodbye, the part almost nobody sees coming because you don't announce it. You engineer it. You stop investing yourself emotionally in office politics. You stop volunteering for projects that only pay off a year from now, a year you already know you won't be there to see. Quietly, without saying a word, you start training the version of your team that'll need to function once you're gone. Because torching the bridge on your way out isn't power, it's carelessness. And carelessness is exactly what exposes people's secret lives before they're ready. You hand in your notice on a Thursday, 2 weeks notice, professional, calm, no big speech, no dramatic unveiling of the business you've spent the better part of a year building right under everyone's nose. Your manager is caught off guard. A handful of coworkers ask what's next for you, and you give them a version of the truth small enough to feel safe and honest enough to not feel like a lie. Going out on my own for a bit. That's all they need to hear. That's all they get. Phase 7 is the first Monday with no office to walk into, and it's the strangest morning of your entire life. No badge, no commute, no meeting to fake your way through, just you, your laptop, your clients, and a silence so complete it feels almost violent after years of noise you never chose. You expect relief. What actually shows up for the first few weeks is a quiet kind of terror. There's no manager left to blame if something goes sideways. There's no company paycheck landing automatically every 2 weeks, whether you crushed it or fell flat that day. Every dollar now has your fingerprints on it, earned or lost, and that weight sits in your chest completely differently than any performance review ever did. This is the part no glossy story about quitting your job ever bothers to show you. The freedom is real. But so is the fear that comes from owning every single outcome, good and bad, entirely on your own. Phase 8 is rebuilding your identity from scratch. For years, whenever people asked what you did, you handed them a job title that belonged to a company, not to you. Now, when they ask, you have to answer with something that's entirely yours, something built in secret, in stolen hours, in the gap between exhaustion and obsession. Saying it out loud for the first time, I run my own business, feels more exposing than that payment notification ever did. You start noticing how differently people treat you at every stage of this journey. Back when you were quietly hustling on the side, the people who knew treated it like a hobby, something cute, something you'd probably drop eventually. Once the income started catching up to your salary, the tone shifted toward curiosity, sometimes envy. Once you actually left, a few people who'd seemed supportive turned distant, almost resentful, Like your escape reminded them a little too clearly of the cage they were still standing in. And a handful of people, the ones who actually mattered, leaned in closer and asked not why did you do this, but how did you do this? That's the real hierarchy hiding inside the 9 to 5. It was never about job titles or corner offices. It was about who was still asleep inside the system and who had quietly, carefully, dangerously woken up. By this final stage, the version of you sitting in that meeting 6 months ago, hiding a buzzing phone under the table, is barely recognizable next to who you've become. You've traded the comfort of a guaranteed paycheck for the full weight of ownership. You've traded a manager's approval for the harder, colder judgment of the market itself. You've traded a predictable ceiling for an uncertain, uncapped sky. You still remember the fear in that conference room, the laptop screen with your name stamped on an invoice you thought was buried. You remember thinking that moment might end everything. Instead, it turned out to be the moment that proved you could survive being discovered, survive the risk, survive the cost of choosing yourself. Some nights you still wonder if you left too soon, or not soon enough. You wonder what would have happened if your manager had pushed harder that day, if fear had won out over the plan. You wonder how many people are sitting in that exact same meeting right now, phone buzzing quietly under the table, running the same silent math you once did. So here's the only question that actually matters now, the one you still can't fully answer, even after living through every single stage of it yourself. If you were sitting in that room today, phone buzzing under the table with proof of the life you're secretly building, would you have the discipline to wait for your moment? Or would you already be reaching for send?